Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. We've got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
And thank you for tuning into the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss everything in fantasy football, from who to start, who to sit, who to bench, who to everything that you need to know. My name is Anthony. Jeremiah will be here in a second. But we're going to start off right now. We're going to get to the game, Thursday Night Football, between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tennessee Titans. I mean, poor NFL. Like, I don't even say that very often, but poor NFL. I mean, they had a bad string of games. You had last Sunday Night Football, which was the Seattle Seahawks versus the Arizona Cardinals, which just seemed like a good game, 6-6 tie. Then the week after that, you get this game. You get the Jacksonville Jaguars against the Tennessee Titans. In the middle of that, you get Brock Osweiler, who averaged 3.2 yards per throw. Not been a good week for the NFL, but at least for fantasy football owners, if you have Blake Bortles, it looks like it's a good day for you because he's king of garbage time. Shout out to Katie Nolan. Blake Bortles is somebody who, if you have him on your fantasy football team, it looks good for you because he's somebody who puts up those garbage time points, 300 yards last week and 3 touchdowns. He's somebody who, if you have him, you absolutely start him. Marcus Mariota looked pretty good. He had 2 touchdowns last night. He's had 2 or more touchdowns for the last 4 weeks now. He's looking like a pretty good quarterback. You also, at least in fantasy football-wise, you also have, for fantasy football, you have DeMarco Murray, who's looking a little bit like he was in the past, right? DeMarco Murray had 123 yards and a touchdown. You even had Derrick Henry, who's kind of getting a little bit of split carries with the Tennessee Titans. He had 16 rushes for 60 yards and a touchdown. So he had 16 rushes. DeMarco Murray had 21, but DeMarco Murray had double with 123 yards. Over the last 4 games, over the last 6 games, DeMarco Murray's averaged over 100 yards and a touchdown, be it against Jacksonville, Cleveland, Indianapolis, Miami, Houston, Oakland. He's been somebody you can absolutely rely on, looking like he was in Dallas, and he actually has more yards this year than he did all of last year. Last year was the first year that he was out of Dallas. He went to Philadelphia, only had 702 yards and 6 touchdowns. This year, 756 and 6 touchdowns. So he's clearly somebody that you should rely on, somebody that looks like somebody to start from the weeks going forward. That is the positives that I have to say right now as far as this Thursday Night Football game is concerned. You have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who's a team that you would hoped would take some strides this year, that you hoped would be something that would be a contender this year, because we saw last season, whether it was Allen Hurns, Allen Robinson, you had some good receivers on the team that you would hope that could take the next step. Blake Bortles, at least number-wise, he had over 4,000 yards. You would hope that he would take the next step, but be it Hurns, be it Robinson, they haven't looked the same. As a rushing attack, Blake Bortles had the leader in rushing yards last night with 22 yards rushing. TJ Yeldon had 20 yards, and Chris Ivory had 6 yards for a total of 48 total yards. TJ Yeldon technically is the leading rusher on the team. When I say technically, I mean because he only has 220 yards rushing. It's a rough start right now for Jacksonville. Jacksonville isn't looking like the team necessarily that you would want to have. Like I said, the only fantasy football person you would want on your team is Blake Bortles. He had 2 touchdowns late, which helped him get those 3 touchdowns, made it look a lot better than what it actually was. If you look at Blake Bortles over the course of the season, only 12 touchdowns, which is not something you would like to have, but 1,904 yards. Basically, he's averaging about 250 yards a game, and for fantasy football purposes, that works for you, right? He's had a couple of touchdowns in 4 of the 7 games that he's played this year. Fantasy-wise, he's not a bad quarterback to start. He's the only one that I would trust as far as doing that. Now, look as far as the Tennessee Titans go. You look at them, now you say, okay, so Marcus Mariota, he's not a bad quarterback. He's somebody that can actually do some good things for you. Now you want to look, okay, so what's the projection going forward, right? Because you can't do anything right now about the game. Either you started him or you didn't. But for Tennessee, you got the Chargers coming up next. You got the Packers after that, and you got the Colts after that. So you got the next 3 games. Potentially they could win all of these games, right? For something like the Tennessee Titans, the Chargers are a team that's hit and miss, right? Every single game that they have, they give up a lot of points, right? They give up it's always a close game for them. You look at the schedule that they've had, the only game that has been more than 4 points that they've lost was a game against the Oakland Raiders, right? They lost 34-31, 26-22 they lost to the Colts, 35-34 they lost to the Saints, 27-33 they lost to the Chiefs. They've always been close in these games, right? The Chiefs is the only one that's been more than 4 points. For them, I think that the Tennessee Titans can have a nice thing going forward. I would start Marcus Mariota in a lot of leagues, assuming that you don't have somebody who is basically one of those super reliable quarterbacks. I'm talking like a Drew Brees, a Matt Ryan, because we've seen how good Matt Ryan is with the re-emergence, I should say, of Julio Jones. And now you look at something like the San Diego Chargers, right? So you wonder, okay, going into these next few games, you would say Tennessee Titans, start DeMarco Murray every single time. Delaney Walker is the only one that you would rely as far as an offensive threat, right, as far as receiving the ball. You know, the tight end for them has 405 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's not Gronk, right? No one's going to ever say that he's Gronk. But he is somebody that over the last few weeks, 75 yards against the Jacksonville Jaguars, 84 yards against the Indianapolis Colts, 83 yards he had against the Lions a few weeks ago. He'll get you solid enough points, right? He's not going to get you 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, right? He's not that guy. But if you need somewhere around 7 to 15 points, he's got you for that. And he's the only one on the team, really, that you would have any kind of hope as far as receiving goes, right? Because we talked about it before. The Tennessee Titans are a really good rushing team. They have one of the best offensive lines in football, but Marcus Mariota doesn't have the weapons that you would hope for in the passing game. Like I said, he's the number 1 guy. Delaney Walker is catching the ball. Rashard Matthews was 357 yards, 259 for Tajay Sharp. Now, going forward with the Jacksonville Jaguars, the one problem the Jacksonville Jaguars have going forward is that they probably won't win a lot of games, but the good thing fantasy football-wise is because they're not going to be in a lot of games, you're going to get good games from Blake Bortles, right? It's something that you don't necessarily have faith in the team, but those garbage time points, you got to love those garbage time points. Like I said, 2 touchdowns last night from Blake Bortles in, basically meaningless minutes, right? They were getting blown out from the jump. You know, at halftime, the Tennessee Titans were winning 27-0. So, you know, you kind of had to get those points when you got them. For Blake Bortles, he's somebody who, going up against teams that they have in the future, right? They have the Kansas City Chiefs. That's going to be really hard. But then you got the Texans after that, a relatively bad defense, not a bad one, but an okay defense. You got the Lions coming in after that. So I would say 2 of those 3 weeks, you start Blake Bortles if you got him. Easy against the Chiefs because it's going to be at Arrowhead, and easy against the Bills and Broncos and Vikings after that. But for 2 of the next 3 weeks, I would start Blake Bortles. Now, coming out after the break, we're going to do a For Real segment. We're going to figure out who is the best quarterback, who's the best wide receiver, who's the best running back in the games for at least the last couple of weeks, and see if they're a real player or not, right? Because we've seen these things before. Be it Jay Ajayi, he's got 200 yards over the last few games. We're going to see if that's something that could actually continue, right? We're going to do a For Real segment with that. Also, we're going to do a start and sit as far as other players. We talked about Blake Bortles and everybody else for the Jaguars and the Tennessee Titans, but we're going to go a little bit deeper. We're going to go more in the NFL. We're going to look at some of the other games this weekend, be it the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Dallas Cowboys or the Raiders and Buccaneers. We're going to take a little bit of a look at that, and we'll do that right after the break here at the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. Okay, so now we're going to do something we're going to do for real segment. Basically, we're going to look at some of the people who are in this game. My name is Anthony.
And guess what, guys? I'm back.
Hey, there's Jeremiah.
Yeah, I'm back.
It's
I'm
fine.
Back. Yeah,
he's here with us now. He's going to help us. We're going to do this for real segment.
Yeah, I had to miss part of the show and the football show as well. So
totally fine. So now we're going to, like I said, look at these either players or teams and see if they're for real or not. Like kind of talk about like we had last week with J.J., how he was starting off strong, but it's just like, is that going to be continuous? Obviously, he's not going to get 200 yards every week, but can you basically rely on him from here on out? So for my for real part, I'm going to go with the San Diego Chargers as a team, right? Because they're one of those strange teams. They're 3-4, but they're on a 2-game winning streak, right? And the wins they have, they look good, right? They beat the Denver Broncos, be it was that Thursday night game where it was just kind of the home team wins and everything else kind of wonky like that. But then you beat the Atlanta Falcons, who offensively, fantastic team. Defensively, not so much, but offensively, fantastic. And the other win you have is against the Jaguars. Congratulations for you. You beat the Jaguars. Congrats. Whatever. You lost to the Chiefs, beat a really close game. You lost to the Colts in a very close game. You lost to the Saints in a very close game. You lost to the Raiders in a very close game. Pattern here. So now you get the second round with the Broncos, right, in Denver. And then you get the Titans, who's 4-14. They're looking like a better team. Marcus Mariota, like I said in the last segment, a couple touchdowns in the last 4 games, looking like a pretty good quarterback. DeMarco Murray, over 100 yards and a touchdown for the last 6 games. Do you think, Jeremiah, that they are for real or not for real with the San Diego Chargers?
San Diego Chargers are that one team that plays on being average every year.
Every year.
That's the thing with me.
Phillip Rivers is going to have the ball at the end of the game.
I can tell you Phillip Rivers is for real.
Oh, of course he's for real.
I just don't. And Melvin Gordon, I think he is for real. You know, he is a touchdown machine this year.
Even Tyrell Williams has done pretty well as a wide receiver. He's been stepping up pretty good for him.
As an overall team, they're not, but, you know, individually with their players, they are.
Okay.
It's like as a team, they don't win games, but like, But
you even got somebody like a Joey Bosa, right, who hadn't had the whole holdout and seeing what he's been doing. He's got 4 sacks in 3 games, right? He's been really good for them, you know, worthy of a top 5 pick. And now you look at the Chargers as a whole, at least they have that good thing on defense. You got Phillip Rivers, who, poor guy, always seems like he's basically, you know, at the end of the game, there's 45 seconds to go. You're at the 20-yard line. Go 80 yards. Have fun. You're down by 4. Have fun.
Well, for fantasy purposes.
For fantasy football, Phillip Rivers is the best, right? He's one of the best at doing that. Tyrell Williams, like I said, has been really good over the last 2 of the last 3 weeks. He had a rough start. I think it was 28 yards 2 weeks ago, but 140 the week before. He's been doing really well for you. You're going to have to go against Denver Broncos defense, which is going to be difficult, right? But you've already beat them one time, so you have at least confidence as far as that goes. All right, so we're going to head over to your for real. And Jeremiah, what do you got?
I'm going to talk about a player that had a big game.
Okay.
Not this past Thursday night, but the prior Thursday night game. And that is Davante Adams, the receiver for the Green Bay Packers.
Okay.
He had a monster game against the Chicago Bears.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he did.
Yeah, he had 16 targets, 132 yards, and 2 TDs.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why I want to put him in this segment is because the Packers have so many weapons on offense. You know,
That's the thing, yeah.
Jordy Nelson, you know, he's had pretty much an up-and-down season since coming back from an ACL injury. Randall Cobb looks like he's more involved in the offense.
Mm-hmm.
Ty Montgomery has become more involved in the offense as a running back and a pass catcher. So that's why I wanted to talk about Davante Adams, if he's for real or not. Because, you know, when are the targets going to come to him, you know?
Right.
I don't think he's going to get, you know, like 16 targets or 13 targets
of course not.
a game.
Yeah.
But he did get 7 targets in his first 2 games.
Yeah. And
then he got 8 targets against the Giants in week 4. So, the targets are there. He has 43 total.
Right.
But I don't know if he's going to get double-digit targets every time.
I don't think he will, and the reason I'm saying that is because, so last week he had the 13 receptions, 13 targets, 13 receptions for 132 yards, right? But then you look at the week before. Ty Montgomery was the guy that they basically went to all the time, 10 catches for 98 yards. The week before that, you had Randall Cobb against the Giants. He was the guy that they decided to go on the bunch, to rely on a bunch. He had 9 catches for 108 yards. The week before that, Jordy Nelson, he was the guy against the Detroit Lions that they decided they wanted to go to a lot with 6 catches for 101 yards. They keep using different guys, right? Aaron Rodgers is really good at spreading it around, and just because you had a good game the week before doesn't mean it's going to continue on to the next game. They keep going with different guys. Maybe this week the one's Jordy Nelson comes back. Maybe Randall Cobb does well. Maybe Eddie Lacy all of a sudden gets like 100 yards receiving. Who knows? I'm saying while the offense as a whole is looking better for Green Bay, I wouldn't solely stick with one guy.
Yeah. And that's the difficult part about the Green Bay Packers. They're kind of similar to the Saints and fantasy purposes.
You got a bunch of different guys.
There's a whole bunch of different guys that can get open. But, of course, Drew Brees is going to always throw it. That's the same thing with Aaron Rodgers. He looks like his play kind of has fallen off a little bit, but he's still Aaron Rodgers. I still think he's a top 5 quarterback in this league.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think Davante Adams needs to be rostered after that huge game, and he's on the Packers. Because remember, Davante Adams was supposed to have that breakout year last year when Jordy Nelson was out. Well, it looks like he's kind of having it this year. And I want to point out that he has 5 total touchdowns so far, and he has found the end zone at least 4 times out of the last 7 games. So that is pretty good to me.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good touchdown ratio. So he is finding the red zone targets, but the thing is, how much consistency can he pull off, in this Packers offense, because they have so many weapons.
Right. You kind of did a good comparison with Drew Brees as far as compared with Aaron Rodgers, because if you look at Drew Brees, 3 of the last 4 weeks, right? So against the Chiefs, Michael Thomas, 10 receptions for 130 yards, right? He was the guy that he liked to go to. The week before that, against the Carolina Panthers, he decided he wanted to go to Brandon Cooks, 7 catches for 173 yards. And then you look at the week before that, against San Diego Chargers, it wasn't the same thing. Mark Ingram was the number 1 catcher, 6 catches for 49 yards. In the week 1, you had Willie Snead go off for 100 yards. So it's one of those things where you keep spreading it around to different people, and you never necessarily know who to start. Drew Brees, obviously start him. Aaron Rodgers, obviously you start him. But everyone around him, as far as receivers go, you don't know. You don't know who's going to be the guy that emerges. It could be someone, I had Willie Snead, and after week 1, I was really happy, this is going to be awesome, right? You get the number 1 guy for the New Orleans Saints, and Drew Brees is going to throw it all over the yard. This is going to be great. I'm going to have so much fun. This is going to be a great year for me. Then as the year went on, 54 yards, 23 yards, 47 yards, and then 87 yards last week to come back to something like you saw week 1. It's not the same thing, right? So you don't know what to do as far as that goes. And we talk about with the Green Bay Packers, if you have someone as wide receiver, it's good. But even Jordy Nelson, who we thought would have a comeback year, hasn't been the same guy.
Yeah, he hasn't. And before we go on our second break here, I just want to break down the Green Bay Packers' upcoming schedule for fantasy purposes. They do play the Atlanta Falcons, this Sunday. I think that's a great matchup against a middle of the pack defense.
Right.
Then they play Indianapolis, great matchup.
Bad defense.
Tennessee, pretty good. They did get kind of torched late by Blake Bortles.
But that's garbage time.
Yeah, it is
garbage time points.
That is garbage time points.
Right.
But, you still got to put that in the
Oh,
count.
no, 100%. No, yeah, exactly.
And Washington could be kind of not a solid matchup. I think Josh Nolan might come back from that concussion program by then. He should.
Yeah.
Philadelphia is a great defense. Houston's a pretty good defense. Seattle's a great defense. Chicago, good matchup.
Yeah.
Minnesota, great defense. Detroit, pretty good matchup. So that's the upcoming schedule for anyone that has any Green Bay Packers on their fantasy team. That includes Aaron Rodgers, Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson, Ty Montgomery, and, of course, Davante Adams.
Exactly. All right, so we're going to take a break. We're going to come back, Next segment, we're going to do a start and sit. We're going to go a little bit more in depth, like we focused morely on the Green Bay Packers and the San Diego Chargers, a little bit with the Saints right now. We're going to go a little bit more specific with certain guys. You need to start, you need to sit, and we'll be right back on the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Whenever I'm getting ready for a big event, I always like to clean up good, and I do it with a razor from Harry's. Harry's, compared to other razors that I've used, I've had the smoothest shave ever. Why should you use Harry's? Well, big razor companies have made a small change, come out with their newest version, quote unquote, and raising their already high prices. Unlike those guys, Harry's doesn't believe in upcharging, which is why they made the razors even better and they're keeping prices exactly the same. Harry's 5-blade razors now include a softer flex hinge for a more comfortable glide, trimmer blade for hard-to-reach places, a lubricating strip, and a texture handle for more control when it's wet. Harry's is so confident in the quality of their blades, they'll send you their popular free trial set, which comes with a razor, 5-blade cartridges, and shaving gel. Get your free trial set when you subscribe. Just pay $3 for shipping. Plus, I have a special offer for you guys. Enter code GSMC at checkout to get a post-shave balm for free with your order. That is one of their popular products, by the way. Go to harrys.com right now and enter code GSMC at checkout to claim your free trial set and post-shave balm. That's harrys.com. That's HARRYS.com.
And welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. Okay, so now we're going to do a little bit of a start and sit thing. We're going to look a little bit more in depth about certain player and who's been performing well, who's been performing terribly, and what you should do as far as that goes. So I'm going to kick this off, right? I'm going to look specifically at the Denver Broncos, right? And if you look at the Denver Broncos, now you got C.J. Anderson, who's done for the year, had surgery, and now you look at the receivers that are on the team. You look at Emmanuel Sanders, and you look at Demaryius Thomas, right? Usually, you would have always gone with Thomas, right? He was always the guy that you would rely on. He's somebody who, since Tim Tebow was there, he always did really well. But if you look at it recently, right, Demaryius Thomas isn't the same guy. At least in the first 3 weeks, he was, right? It was someone who you could absolutely rely on. He's somebody who was getting 80, 90, 100 yards a game. But over the last 4 weeks, right, 49 against the Falcons, 35 against the Chargers, 40 against the Houston Texans. So now for the fourth week in a row, you would assume he's not going to stay as well because he's going to get the San Diego Chargers, which isn't a good defense, right? It's not like they're the Minnesota Vikings or the Denver Broncos even, like some defense like that, right? They're a middle-of-the-road defense, but the same thing could have been said about the Atlanta Falcons, and you already had the game where they played the San Diego Chargers once, and he only had 35 yards. So I understand that someone who you kind of know by name, he's got 7,000 yards in his career, somebody that you've known for a handful of years. I would say sit Demaryius Thomas this week because I don't think he's going to be what you think he's going to be.
So you're saying sitting
Demaryius Thomas.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, these receivers with the Denver Broncos, I always think it's always a sit and start game with these guys, the whole season. Because, the quarterback position, and not only that, they're a run-first team.
Well, you look at Emmanuel Sanders, the guy on the other end, right? Outside of the 40 yards he had against San Diego, it's been at least 80 yards in every single game. And, against the Bengals, 117 and 2 touchdowns. Against the Buccaneers, 88 and a touchdown. He's been a lot better of a receiver than Demaryius Thomas. Because you're starting Demaryius Thomas because you're thinking he's going to be one of those A.J. Green, Julio Jones type of guys that's going to get you a lot of points. He hasn't been doing that over the last 3 weeks. So that's, at least my sit of the week.
No, I completely agree with you. It's hard for me to trust these Denver Broncos receivers. I wasn't high on any of them coming into the draft. I didn't really want to touch them because I knew I was worried about the inconsistency between this group, especially with the quarterback position.
Right.
At the beginning of the year, it was very uncertain. And regardless of whether Mark Sanchez, who's not even with the team anymore, or Trevor Siemian competing for the job, I didn't trust these receivers. But I do want to talk about the running backs there in Denver. And he is one of the players you have to start. He's a must start, and that's Devontae Booker.
Mm-hmm.
He is going. I think he's going against the San Diego Chargers this week. Yeah, he is going against the San Diego Chargers.
Yeah.
And he is a must start because he is now going to be the workhorse now because C.J. Anderson is possibly out for the season.
Yeah.
Possibly out for the season. And he is a must-start, guys. You have to start him. You have to. Great matchup. He's probably going to be a pretty good fantasy starter the rest of the way. Might claim the role going forward heading into next year.
I mean, he had 83 yards and a touchdown the week before against the Houston Texans, so he's somebody who's already kind of been paying dividends as far as someone you can see, and you can be like, okay, I at least trust him so far, and he's going to keep getting those yards for you going forward. Yeah, so I definitely agree with that.
Okay. What's another player you want to sit?
So I'm going to go with somebody to start, right?
Okay.
Because I did my sit, so I'm going to go with start now. Frank Gore, right? Someone who, again, I'm not saying start him in the sense of like he's going to be someone like Ezekiel Elliott. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying he's going to be somebody like David Johnson. But if you look at him and what he's been doing for the last 5 weeks, right? Because you kind of got to get a gauge of like, okay, is he having a good game or a bad game? Last week was the worst game that he had. He only had 61 yards rushing, but he had 22 yards receiving and a touchdown, right? Week before that, 106 yards rushing. Before that, 75 yards. Before that, only 68, but 27 yards receiving and a touchdown. Week before that, 82 yards and a touchdown. So he's been somebody who will get you around 100 yards in total offense every single week, which is something Frank Gore has been so consistent of for his whole career, right? He's been basically averaging about 1,000 yards, a little over 1,000 yards per season, and if you average this out throughout the whole year, he's projected to get 1,131 yards, but he's not somebody who you look at the first glance and be like, oh, yeah, I think he's going to get a lot of yards. But if you look at the stats throughout the entire year, he's not too far off, right? Like I said, he's not DeMarco Murray or Ezekiel Elliott or anybody else like that, but he's 9th in the NFL in rushing with tied for 9th, 495 with Isaiah Crowell, and he's in front of people like Melvin Gordon, Matt Jones, Jeremy Hill, C.J. Anderson, Carlos Hyde. Like, he's in front of these guys. Slowly but surely, he's been doing this. And if you have him, like I said, he's not your number one, but if he's your number 2 or a flex, he's a really good guy to start.
Yeah. And it's just something I want to report here. Some breaking news here. Adam Schefter just tweeted, Broncos running back C.J. Anderson, his knee surgery was minor, and he can return as soon as 4 weeks.
Okay,
so that's huge for C.J. Anderson owners.
Yeah.
So you better hold on to him, guys.
Okay, so
better hold on to him.
But like you were talking about with Davante, he's somebody that can absolutely come in and give you a good burst for the next, call it 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, I did say that, but you still got to hold on to C.J. Anderson. He's going to get a role when he comes back.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to go for a sit. I got one more sit and start, so I'm going to say him at the same exact time. My sit of the week is Jonathan Stewart versus the Arizona Cardinals. And my other start is Jameis Winston versus the Oakland Raiders. I'm going to go with Jonathan Stewart first. He was he averaged 17 carries per game in pretty much the 2 weeks he's been healthy.
Right.
The last 2 games. But this matchup is really difficult. This is a difficult matchup. Arizona, they did bottle up Christine Michael last week in that, epic 6-6 game.
That game.
They held Michael to 52 yards on 16 carries. So, going back to the running backs that the Arizona Cardinals have played, they held Todd Gurley and Matt Forte. They kind of contained those guys as well. So, Jonathan Stewart, I think he's someone that you have to sit if you have better options out there. He's definitely a low-end RB2 this week.
Right.
But if you really don't have anyone better, then maybe you could start him as RB2. But I think the majority of people will have him sitting in the lineups. Arizona they're still a tough team. They're still a tough defense.
Yeah.
They haven't looked good on offense, but no, that's not the defense's fault. So I think that is a difficult matchup for the Jonathan Stewart. But going back to Jameis Winston here, I think he's in a great matchup going against the Oakland Raiders here. You see what he did against the San Francisco 49ers, a horrid, embarrassing defense.
Right.
And he probably played his best game since week 3 when he was going against the Rams.
Right.
269 yards and 3 touchdowns. was pretty efficient. Had his best completion percentage since week 1, 70%. Second best quarterback rating since week 1.
Yep.
So it was a pretty good game, pretty good matchup. I think he's going to head in. He's actually going to be at home going against Oakland.
Right.
So, it's another game for Jaquiz Rogers to go off before Doug Martin comes back. Another game for Mike Evans to go off. And it's another game for Jameis Winston. Perfect matchup for Jameis Winston right there. There are several teams on bye this week. So I think he's the ultimate bye-week fill-in.
Yeah, he's somebody who's been kind of up and down to start the year, right? He had a good game against Atlanta, bad against Arizona, good LA, bad Denver. Okay against Carolina and good against San Francisco. And now you're assuming against Oakland, whose defense isn't as good as you would hoped it would be coming into the year with people like Khalil Mack. Yeah, I think Jameis Winston's somebody who you can definitely rely on, get you about 250, get a couple touchdowns. Yeah, absolutely a starter.
All right, well, that concludes our show, Anthony. We'd like to thank you guys for tuning in to the Going to Meet Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. You can catch the show on iTunes every week, as well as on Google Play, YouTube, Stitcher, and SoundCloud, and as well as the website, gsmcpodcast.com. You can also follow the show on Twitter at GSMC_FFootball and on Instagram at GSMC_FFootball. And you can also like us on Facebook at the Go to State Media Concepts Football Podcast. As always, I'm Jeremiah.
And I'm Anthony.
And I'll be back by myself on Tuesday, and I'll see you guys next week.